Thank you so much, Alex, for having me. I'm super excited to talk about this project. Let me just pull up my screen here, start presenting. This was a brand new project for New Harvest. We've never really done such a large merch push, and we learned a lot of really interesting things about building community and also generating this brand awareness through the process. For those of you who don't know, for the past, I would say, I guess it's been since July, we produced these masks first we distributed them to friends within our community, and then actually produced a second round of masks and sold them to our community donation-based sales there. And so today I just want to talk to you a little bit about how the design process for the creation of these masks worked, what the actual production process was, and then some of the things we learned from that process. But before I get into that, just a little bit about me. So I came to New Harvest in November of 2019, so it's almost been a year now. I come from a chemistry background. So when I was going through college, I loved science. I wanted to pursue that, really understand more of the why and how things happened, but I could never really get rid of the fact that I loved design as well. This was design has always been a passion from when I was very young. And so that's in fact why I majored in chemistry and minored in studio arts. And so with these merging interests, while I was looking for internships and kind of trying to get some sort of career path going in college, I was looking for an organization or a company where I could intern and merge these two interests. And it was kind of random. I think it was through a podcast that I heard about cultured meat and this process of growing meat in a lab. And through this podcast, I was introduced to the world of cell ag. So I thought this was super cool. I think there's a lot of ways that I could apply this or bridge the science and art and design. And so I did a little scavenging in the industry, and I came across New Harvest. And New Harvest, I felt perfectly aligned this design aesthetic, this consideration for design, while also focusing on science. And I felt that joining the team there, first as an intern, I was an intern in 2018 as the conference design intern, and then later on in 2019 also did conference design as a volunteer. That was the perfect introduction to what I would understand could be a combination of science and design. And then I was so fortunate after I graduated from college, I was looking for a job, and New Harvest was expanding their team, and they wanted someone to help with the graphic and brand design. And so that's why I joined the team. And so now just a little bit about New Harvest. For those of you who don't know, we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we fund researchers that are conducting open access research in cellular agriculture. The way I like to describe cell ag for those of you who are not familiar to the industry, it's essentially the process of creating animal products in lab. So for example, meat, you don't have to slaughter an animal. You can just take a little biopsy, cultivate those cells in lab, and create an edible product. So here's what you can expect in this presentation. First of all, as I mentioned previously, we started this project with an intent to build community, and it really then developed into a merchandising experiment of sorts. I like to call it that. And so I want to explore in this presentation first the design process, so how we came to this idea, then delve a little bit deeper into how the masks were actually made, and then finally do a little briefing on what the outcomes were, what were our big takeaways. So first, why masks? I mean, we really wouldn't need masks if not for the pandemic, so that's kind of obvious, but the way that the pandemic directly impacted New Harvest was through the cancellation of our conference. Each year in July, this goes back to 2016, we have a conference. Because of the pandemic, we had to cancel it. But what's so great about our conference is the ability for it to bring people together, bring people within the industry, come together and network. And we have so many stories of people coming to our conference, meeting their co-founder, meeting their a future employee, lots of different connections that come from our conference. And so we decided, how then can we still drive this feeling of connectedness and community if we don't have this in-person event? And so we're thinking, okay, can't have an in-person event, but the way that people can sometimes relate to each other is if they have some commonalities. So what if people see themselves, they have some sort of tangible thing that they can relate to someone else? And so then this got these masks. And although we don't, and I think Isha shared this philosophy of hers with me, Isha's our executive director, she doesn't really like merch because it sometimes doesn't have any utility. What are you going to do with a t-shirt? Sure, you can clothe yourself, but it doesn't have as much utility. So we always want to be putting out products that, or something that has utility. And so for us, a mask not only would prevent waste, because people had to buy masks anyways, why not purchase a reusable mask, one that isn't just disposable and you have to throw away, but also these masks were contributing to public health. And so that was our rationale behind making these masks. And so now we knew, okay, we're going to make masks. Now, what are they going to look like? So I'm going to delve a little bit deeper into the design process here. But I have to say, before I go into details about what happened when Mira, who's my colleague, and I were chatting about this, we always come to the table with some, preconceived notions, some things that we want, some, some aspirational ideas. At least I do. And so I want to give you a little sneak peek into what was on my mind. First was, our organization really focuses on the science. And so I wanted to make sure that this design in some way tied in the science. And this not only relates to our organization, but also relates to my personal interests of tying science and art together. Secondly, is it wearable? Is it something that I would want to wear? Because you can put a logo on anything, but sometimes if it's not, yes, we have big brands, they can put logos everywhere and people will buy them and wear them everywhere, but that's a luxury brand. Is this something that is cool? This also aspect of cool that would make me want to wear it. And then finally, and this is probably the most selfish or personal reason, was I'd just been seeing a lot of tie-dye masks around and I just wanted to make one for myself. That was it. I just thought tie-dye masks were cool. I was gonna put one together. So these were the things that were on my mind. So Mira and I sat down, we started talking about what were we going to put on these masks? What were they going to look like? And the first idea we came up with was a meat print pattern fabric. And just did a quick Google search on that. And these were the results. We had one kind of an illustrated fabric, meat print, and then one that was quite graphic, I would say, photographs of raw meat plastered onto fabric, printed directly on the fabric. And these were great. They're fun, they're relevant to what we're doing, but they were expensive. It was $12 per yard. And in addition to that, they were only tangentially related to what we're doing. So again, this idea of the science, what we are really focusing on the fundamental research in cell ag. The slabs of meat, the hamburgers are going to come later. We want to focus on the fundamental research. And so again, with this conception, is the science, are we taking science into consideration? This one did not check that box. So we decided to not pursue that. So the next path was, okay, New Harvest, we've got our colors, we've got our logos. Let's do a New Harvest logo print or the colors. And with this, we ran into that same issue of cost. If we wanted to print our logo on something, one is going to be expensive because it was the same process as the meat print, where it would have to be actually like stamped onto fabric. But then also, if we thought about, okay, maybe not the logos, but maybe just the colors, what would actually be interesting about a mask that only had blue and red on it? And in addition to that, that design would be focused mostly on our brand and would not tie in the science again, as was top of mind. So that was off the table. So now we've gone through two options. Kind of, I don't know, we're losing steam here, not quite sure which direction to go in. But I still keep thinking science, science, science. And then I remember tie-dye. Tie-dye was still always on my mind just because I think it's a cool design. And so at that moment, I remembered a DIY YouTube video of one of my, I really enjoy her content. It's at with Wendy. She makes just a bunch of DIY videos, and she'd created a video on exhibiting various tie-dyeing techniques. And one of them included the Arashi Shibori technique. And the more I thought about it, the more I was thinking, wait, doesn't this look like myosatellite cells? For those of you who aren't super aware, the myosatellite cell is the starting cell for any cultured meat product. And so I really, now I had the gears turning. It really feels like this, I could be onto something. So, because look, that's what they looked like. That's how oftentimes myosatellite cells, or not oftentimes, that is how myosatellite cells are depicted. And so I thought I was onto something. So I decided to start Googling myosatellite cells under microscope, skeletal muscle cells under a microscope. And this is what I came up with. And I got a little discouraged. I was thinking, what's happening here? That doesn't look, why is this not the way that myosatellite cells are represented when you see them everywhere in a bunch of cultured meat presentations and products and everything. So I was a bit confused, but thankfully I have my trusty Slack channel. It was the Help Me Out channel. This is where all of New Harvest team, including our fellows, are able to contribute if anyone has any help that's needed. And so I posed my question. I've got another muscle cell imagery question. I guess I have a lot of them. If skeletal muscle cells generally look like this, and so I sent my little rough sketch there, then why are they generally represented like this in cultured meat application? And I got a reply back, and it was basically saying that individual cells look like my sketch on the right. It's only once they've developed that they turn into my sketch on the left. And so with that, I felt confident that the Arashi Shibori technique was the perfect way for me to incorporate this idea of science. So this design was going to have a scientific element to it. And it was cool, it was wearable, and also selfishly, it had tie-dye in it. So I had also accomplished that goal. So to give you a little bit of background into the Arashi Shibori technique, you start out with your fabric. That is wrapped around some sort of tube. I ended up using a PVC pipe. It's wrapped around the PVC pipe. It gets scrunched. Then the fabric is dipped into some dye bath. And once you unroll it, you should have this gorgeous, gorgeous pattern, which in a lot of ways resembles myosatellite cells. So now we knew what the design was. It was time to figure out who was going to make these masks. And immediately I was so excited about this project. I loved the design. I knew I had to make it. So I said, oh, I'm making these masks. I'm going to make them. And thankfully, Mira was in the room with me, and she was like, Michela, you have a full-time job. What are you doing? You can't just make 250 masks. And so we decided to pose the question again, who's going to make these masks? And I got to thinking, back at the beginning of the pandemic, a friend had reached out to me saying that he had a friend in North Carolina who needed some help sewing some masks. She'd started making masks at the beginning of the pandemic and was just so overwhelmed with orders that she needed someone to help her with the orders. And unfortunately, I was unable to help her. But then it got me thinking, if there's someone in North Carolina who can make masks, who's a person that I know I can talk to, then why wouldn't there be someone in New York City who could do the same thing? So that's how we ended up finding Danica Pantic. She's a Brooklyn-based textile artist. It was actually Mira who sent me a New York Post article about her. She started making masks at the beginning of the pandemic, first as donations, and then was also, in order to help sustain the practice, was selling masks as well. And so I reached out to her, talked to her a little bit about her masks and the various features of her masks, and I realized she had a really great mask design. It's fitted, there was a nose wire, there were soft elastic ear loops, and not only that, but it also had a polypropylene filter layer on the inside. Polypropylene is similar to surgical, the material of surgical masks. And so this not only fit with the idea of making something cool and wearable, but also with the idea of making it useful. A lot of masks that I had seen online, Vistaprint, other big companies like that, where you could make customizable masks, they did not have all these features. And so I thought the utility of the mask would decrease if we were to pursue a design that was not similar to the one that Danica could make for us. So not only was it a good mask design, but it was also fully customizable. So it's different when you're talking with an individual who can take the fabric, has their own process, and can just do the various steps to get to that customizable mask. That's very different than trying to go to a big corporation, big company who has a manufacturing process in place, and they're not going to change their whole manufacturing line to be able to make these fully customizable masks. And given that they were fully customizable, you might think, oh, then cost increases. But in fact, we got a really, really great price with Danica, and she did truly amazing work. So now we had the person to produce these masks. Let's go into a little bit the details. Let's dissect the mask here and how we came to the decisions on the various elements. So first was fabric. We had to choose the right fabric. I'd been doing a little bit of research and had heard that cotton was the right fabric. But there are two types of weaves. First, you have this woven pattern, and then you have a knitted pattern, a knitted weave, sorry. And the more research I did, I heard that the top woven pattern is actually better because the threads can sit more tightly together, and so it's better for filtering or air, essentially. Knit fabric is not good because the holes between the threads are still too large. And so we decided that a 100% woven cotton fabric for the exterior was the right choice. So now we come to choosing the right color dye. So we know what the pattern's going to look like, but what's the color going to be? And for this, we look to the cell culturing process, and that right there, that's a photo from our research fellow, John, at Tufts University. That's his little container of FBS, fetal bovine serum, or some growth medium. And we thought that would be the perfect color for these masks. And so I got really super technical with it, probably didn't have to get this technical, but I set up my own little dye creation lab on my kitchen counter. I want to thank my roommates for allowing me to take over the counter for quite some time. And here was just mixing various dye colors. So I think I had tangerine, red wine, and coral I was mixing various proportions of the colors to see what what ratio of colors would get me closest to some growth media color. And it turns out I actually did all that work unnecessarily because the RIT dye in coral was actually most similar to the color of FBS, or the growth media there. So we have our fabric, we have the dyes. Now it's time to take the fabric and wrap it around something. And so we had to consider what was the size of the PVC pipe that this fabric was going to be wrapped around. And this all comes down to scale. So if we ended up going with a much larger tube, a much larger pipe, we could end up with a pattern that was too large to actually fit within the depth of, or the width of the mask. And you might only have a striation, or you wouldn't actually see the proper print on the mask for that size. And so that was incredibly important that we didn't go too large with this PVC pipe. A benefit of going larger though was scalability. So the larger the PVC pipe, then the more fabric you can wrap around it, and thus the process goes faster. But we could definitely not compromise on the scale. We didn't want to lose the clarity in the pattern. We also didn't want to go too small though, because again, this idea of scalability, I think I was able, with a 3-inch diameter PVC pipe, I was able to wrap 1.5 yards of fabric. And that took a while. And so if we decided to go really super small with a PVC pipe, sure, we would get definition in the myosatellite print pattern, but we would then lose on time, and it might take a much longer time to actually dye all the fabric. So then, as you might know, and I can hold up my own masks here. So the mask was color blocked. So one side is printed and the other side is a solid color. And I would love to say that this was a way to conceptualize this idea that some people believe that one of the first cultured meat products are going to be a mix of cell cultured meat and conventionally raised meat. And so in a way, the myosatellite print on one side was symbolic of the cell culturing process, and the other side was symbolic of the conventionally raised meat. Anyways, I would love to be able to say that. This actually came down to, again, scalability and having to dye so much fabric within this pattern with limited supplies. So I had decided to only pick up one PVC pipe with a 3-inch diameter and a 3-gallon dye bath. To dye 12 yards of fabric in this pattern would have probably taken me, oh gosh, a long time. I'll leave it at that. So I had to make an executive decision. I think 6 yards of myosatellite printed pattern or printed fabric would be fine. Let's color block. And I also would like to think that this was definitely the most scalable option. That was a given. But it's also a happy little accident, because I think having this color blocking actually added dimension and interest to the design of the mask. And so I think had I pursued the dyeing 12 yards of this fabric in myosatellite print, it would have lost some of that interest. So now, though, that we had this color blocking pattern in place, it was important to choose the label positioning, because before, had the mask been all myosatellite cells, the print, then it wouldn't matter where the label went necessarily. You could go on either side. Full disclosure, I think from a balance perspective, the label actually should have gone on the solid colored side of the mask. And this is because you have the one side that is very busy, it has the print. You wouldn't necessarily need to add anything there. And then adding the label to the opposite side that has less eye-catching, there's less interest there, would have balanced the mask better. But we really had to think, what is our goal with these masks? The goal is to build community and then also generate some brand awareness. And so we had to think, will it photograph well? And then we had to think, okay, what might people's tendencies be when photographing this mask? If I had this mask, I would want to photograph the cultured meat side because that's the cool side. And so with this idea of brand awareness, then we also decided to put the label on the cultured meat side for that same reason. And we've got some great photos of our community members here all wearing their masks, displaying the logo. So now we've got all the steps down. We know how the design is going to look like, what materials we're using. We know who's going to make it. So I'm going to go into a little bit of background in the dyeing process and the production side of things. And I want to start us off with this lovely little TikTok video that we put together. Yes, New Harvest has a TikTok. Go check us out.
Story.
Great, there it is. And for those of you who don't know, that's a classic TikTok song that is typically played along with like DIY videos. So we definitely wanted to incorporate that there. And in that video, you can also see how challenging it was because the pipe only went halfway into a 3-gallon bucket. So then I had to flip it over, and that's really what took some time. But what really, the dyeing process was incredibly interesting. Not only was it incredibly exciting to see the final, once I pulled the fabric off the PVC pipe, you never really knew what you were going to get. And so there was a little bit of mystery, a little bit of excitement, but it always turned out this incredible pattern at the end. But the more I thought about the dyeing process, and it was actually a specific event that kind of sparked this idea for me. And that was, here's a picture of after I'd scaled up, essentially. So first production was with 1 PVC pipe in a 3-gallon bucket. Then I scaled up for second round of production, and I bought 3 PVC pipes with, I want to say it was a 12-gallon bucket, I'm not sure. And I looked down and I kind of chuckled to myself. I was like, oh, we're scaling up. Scaling up in the cell ag world is definitely, it's one of probably the biggest challenges because I don't want to minimize the I guess the process of culturing meat, but to culture meat in small quantities, it's a relatively straightforward process. But when when you actually have to scale it up to for distribution on a international or global scale, that is where some of the biggest challenges for cultured meat companies today lie. And so I kind of looked down at my 3 PVC pipes floating in there. That was the dye fixative. So I snapped a photo and I sent it to the team in the Slack channel. And Isha wrote back and she said, oh, it kind of looks like like they're all in their little scaffolds. And that got me thinking, wait, yeah, this is kind of like the cell culturing process. So you have your fabric, so that's like the muscle cells, which are wrapped around a PVC pipe, like a scaffold. And then that is submerged in the dye, like the growth medium. That's all being held within a bucket, like a bioreactor. And I just got a big kick out of that. And not only that, but after the project wrapped up and I was putting away the PVC pipes, I looked down at one of them and it said cellular right on the side of the PVC pipe. So I think it was kind of it was just meant to be. This was meant to happen. It was definitely a sign that we'd done well. So that there is the dyeing process. And here are just some pictures of the final product. You can see the pattern that came out of it, definitely looking like, or in my opinion, I think it looks very much like myosatellite cells. Here's a picture with my hand for scale. And you can see that there is a lot of variation in the pattern throughout the bolted fabric. And this came from the fact that when you wrap the fabric around the PVC pipe, you're going to have fabric that doesn't touch the dye for as long. And so that's where you get, I would say, probably a more defined or higher contrast pattern with that right there in the center. And what makes all the masks unique, there's not two masks that are exactly the same. And then here, oh, there's a photo of the fabric dried, washed at the laundromat. That's where I did most of the good old New York City laundromat. So now let's look at the numbers. How did we fare? How did this project that started out only a distribution to friends within the community and eventually grew into sales, donate as you wish sales. We ended up distributing over 450 masks, and we got back over 40 social media photos, and just seeing everyone's faces with all their masks just really makes me very happy, very, very happy to see it. So in the second production round, we ended up having to increase the number of masks that we wanted to make because of demand. So after we had done the first round, we distributed our masks to friends within the community, and we got a little buzz going. Then we started asking people, oh, who would be interested in purchasing a mask? And we got, I think, 40 responses or so. So we said, okay, we'll ask Danica to make 100 masks, and that should be plenty. You know, once we bring more fellows on, we will have more to distribute. It'll always be good to have. So 100 is fine. With 40 people wanting masks, that's totally good. So we were up to 100, and we opened up the form, and quite soon, the form was open for a week. We had to bump it up to 150. And then so we were up to 150. And then it was literally the night before the form was about to close, 10 p.m. I remember this specifically. I was eating falafel, and I got a message from Mira saying, we're almost going to reach 200. What are we going to do? I said, oh, like, that's fine. I'm sorry. A part that I missed was that at this point we had increased production. We'd asked Danica to make 200 masks. After we reached the 100 mask point, we asked her to make 200. So it was okay. It's the last night. There won't be too many coming in. We were wrong. We ended up hitting the 250 mark, 251. And then I just decided, okay, we're just gonna see how many orders come in. And then we'll just ask Danica to make as many masks as she can with the fabric that I provided her. So that was incredibly exciting. We did get an odd number. 299 was the total number of masks made for the second run. That was just because Danica ran out of nose wires. So we'll forever have 299 masks in the second run there. Some interesting facts an interesting fact though, with this donate as you wish, we had a donate as you wish platform for the sales. 78% of the people who purchased masks were actually first-time donors, which was, I don't know if I don't think I was surprised. I guess I didn't really have any expectations, but that was incredibly telling. And this leads me to some of our key takeaways. And the first one I want to talk about this idea of it being a cultured meat mask and not a new harvest mask. This was not something that we had generated. Internally, we were talking about, new harvest mask, but I think it was someone on Twitter who started calling it the cultured meat mask. And this got us thinking, then people were interested in the cultured meat mask, not so much the new harvest mask. And what this told us, or the way I'm interpreting this, is that what's more important is our mission. It's not people, I mean, we have diehard New Harvest fans, but they love us because of our mission. And creating a mask that was focused, or that showed this mission of the culturing meat, that's really what for us pushed such an outpour of excitement for these masks. It wasn't so much the New Harvest brand. And so this really told us that it was good we did not pursue a logo or New Harvest color based mask, because although I don't have a control group, um, I would love to do that experiment, see like how sales would go, looking at the two. But we realized that it's really, people love the mission, and that's why they support what we do. And then this also comes down to the idea of transactional donations, and this is directly related to that 78% of people who were first-time donors. And this has really, the growth here is that we're realizing that there's actually almost like an untapped market, a place that we can grow into in order to build support for cell ag research. And this cultured meat mask project was exactly that, which will allow us to experiment with more things, more merch drops, and really understand how best we can support the cell ag research. And so with that, I just want to thank you all, and I'm open for any questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was very cool. So we have some questions in here, and I think some comments too. So we'll start getting to those. But if you do have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we will try to get to them. And so we have one question from Sebastian that says the cell photos had different colors. Did you print different colors? I think that was a reference to the cells,
Yes.
yeah. So did you print any other colors for the mask?
Oh, no, we didn't. We only made the coral color. Yeah, that was just, it was most aligned with this FBS growth medium color. And so that's why we did get some requests for a green mask though, which was interesting, but unfortunately we could not make such small quantities of one color.
Great. We have another question, and they're asking, would Danica be open to having advertising on it, so on the masks? And I'm not sure maybe if it's referencing like advertising of her own brand or name, or maybe something else. So for whoever put in that question, maybe feel free to submit some additional details, but any thoughts on that, Michela?
Yeah, so actually throughout one of the big parts about making these masks was social media, I guess, engagement. And every time Danica follows us on Instagram, and so every time that we post a mask, she's always there, liking, sharing with her own. We always tag her in all the posts, or most of the posts, and she's always been really, really great to work with. And actually, a lot of the social media posts are actually with our masks are on her website. And so we've worked directly with her in ensuring that she gets the credit that she deserves.
Great. We have we had a question from somebody who came in late, and I answered your question through text, but just for anyone else that might be interested, we are recording this webinar, so we will be sending it to attendees afterwards. And then we did have a comment from Steve who said, watermelon meets oats. So maybe that's what he thought of when he first saw the masks. And so we have another question from Steve. How did you find a manufacturer for the masks? Two questions, for the material and for the print. I guess maybe for the print, I think you did a lot of that yourself. So maybe where did you source the materials?
Yeah, so at the time I was living in New York City, and the garment district is a wonderful thing. There was a shop there that actually, when I was looking for white cotton fabric, that was in July, there was a very limited quantity of white cotton fabric in all of New York City. I don't know how many fabric stores I called trying to get a hold of white cotton fabric. But I finally found it at, I want to say it was called Fabric World. We had actually shopped at their shop when we were picking up materials for the 2019 conference backstage backdrop. And so I knew that they were a good source for the fabric. And then the dyes, I just used RIT dyes, Blick art store in New York City, also great. And the other materials, oh, I picked up some PVC pipes from my local hardware store. Yeah, it was just kind of a, you know, it's nice living in New York City when you are doing a project like this, because really the world is your oyster. You have everything at your fingertip, essentially.
Sounds definitely like an exciting DIY.
Yes, oh, it was.
So we have a question from Elizabeth who asks, what was the average donation given to receive a mask?
Mm. So our suggested donation was $15. And we actually found that most people either gave that or above, which was really incredible. We have a really incredible community. Yeah, it was really great to see the love and support, all for CellAg.
So I have a question in regards to kind of measuring success for something like this. How do you measure the success of kind of community building, right? I think you put in a really good metric that was, you asked, what was it, like you sent out, or you asked 450 people and you got 40 photos.
Right.
And so, you know, I mean, that's definitely a nice metric, but when it comes to kind of community building, what would you say is the metric for measuring success?
That's a really tough one, because community building is really, it comes down to the personal level, where you can't force a sense of community on anyone. And so seeing just how people engage with us on social media through distribution of the photos, either through retweeting, the various promotional material that we put out, that was one way that we tried to measure the sense of community. Yeah, you know, that's also, I think this is why also I call it a merchandising experiment, or just an experiment in general, because I think the idea of building community is a very challenging question. And I think it's more qualitative than quantitative. Yeah, I don't know if I answered your question well, but it's an ongoing process, and something that myself and the team are constantly thinking about and talking about. Yeah, invite me to another talk when I have the answer, but that might have to come in a little bit.
Definitely, I think I think you kind of explained it right, that there is no kind of, you know, maybe there is no black and white measurement, right? But the idea that people were calling it cultured meat mask was also really cool. That's like community within itself. So we have a question that just came in from Nicholas. What was the biggest challenge of the project?
The biggest challenge for me, I think, was actually at the beginning, when I decided that I was going to personally dye the fabric. I knew the design was good. I knew what Arashi Shibori dyeing could do, what the pattern could become. But the reason why tie dyeing is so difficult is because you never really know what's going to come out of it. I mean, that's a whole hand dyeing process in general. And so I really wanted to make sure that the print that I captured was one that, as closely as possible, resembled myosatellite cells. And so, and also there was a little bit of hesitation, like, is this a route we want to pursue if we can't guarantee that it's going to work? And I was like, oh, yes, I'm gonna say I can guarantee it, but I never could guarantee that the process, that what we were gonna get out of it was gonna look like myosatellite cells. And so that hesitation I kind of had to just say, no, just one part of me that kept saying, don't do it. This is a bad idea. Like it could go really wrong. I had to shove that away and just think, have confidence in myself and say, no, this is going to work. I mean, if you have the dye, if you have the technique, or why wouldn't it work? You know, I kind of had to tell myself that. And so actually that very first, because I bought all the fabric, I bought all the dyes, I bought all the instruments and tools and everything. That first time that I unwrapped it from the PVC pipe and opened it up and saw how it was looking, that was the most nerve-wracking part and probably the most challenging. And then after that point, it was just a process getting it done, which helped when I scaled up. But yeah, definitely a challenging part of the whole process.
Great. Nick did a follow-up of how you solved it, but I think you answered that pretty well. And we're starting to get some more abstract questions here. So Jacqueline asks, what was the impetus for the project?
The impetus.
Maybe what was that driving
Yeah.
force
Yeah.
for the project?
Well, I guess the question specifically relating to the design or why we wanted to make masks in general. I guess I could.
Well, Jacqueline did submit a follow-up. She said, okay, so she just answered both. So both. And then her follow-up was, can you quantify how much each cost to make? Did you make a profit and what was the goal?
Okay, yes. So to answer the first question of why we chose to make masks, I mean, to a certain extent, we were just seeing a lot of branded masks everywhere. So that was also a bit of the push to get our own branded masks out there. Again, as I mentioned previously, people were going to buy masks, so why not do it for a good cause and a mission that people supported. So that was a big part about why we chose to do masks. The reason why we decided to pursue this look, the pattern of the myosatellite cells, I think that was just me just really wanting to do something that I thought was cool. I don't know if everyone thinks it's cool, but I really thought it was cool. And it was also a way to do something that was very different from what I get to do every day in the office. So a lot of my work tends to be behind Illustrator, doing various assets, doing a little bit of organizational and strategic planning. But I wanted to take a little step back, do a little bit more of hands-on work. And so I think that was also a driving force. In my mind, I thought it was cool. And so if I think it's cool, why not? As long as the team is with me, let's pursue it and see what comes out of it.
I love it. And I will say, so I have one here, just like the first time I saw the pattern, I really thought it was like a literal kind of like you took the photo from the microscope and then printed it on the fabric. And so it just looks super cool.
Praise.
So.
High praise. Thank you.
So we have a couple more questions. Sebastian asks, the references to tissue culture were spot on. Are you planning on preparing more projects that are also references to the sciences? So maybe other projects in a similar.
Yeah, well, as you might recall, that's always what I want to pursue. That's always top of mind. It's like, how can we incorporate science into some cool design project? We don't have ideas yet on more merch drops, but we're always open to suggestions. So if anyone has suggestions, definitely email myself or Mira. We're always open to hearing what you would like to see, but always science and art combined, if at all possible, always. That's the way to go.
Great. We have one question that asks, like, where did you sell the masks and how did you market them?
Yeah. So most of our marketing happened through social media. This was either through our Instagram or Twitter is actually a really big cell ag space. So if you're interested in cell ag and you want to learn more, you have to be on Twitter. And that's mostly where the advertisement for the masks happened, the promotional happened. in terms, remind me of the second question.
The second part of that question was, how did you market them?
How did?
So I guess promote
Oh
them.
wait. Oh wait. So then what was the first?
Oh, it was where did you sell them?
Where did we sell them?
Yeah, let me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah. Where did you sell them, and then how did you market them?
Yeah. So this is actually a process, and we're doing a little bit of restructuring on our, I guess, the organizational level, and so in terms of the various systems that we use, and so we didn't actually have a good system for bringing in donations, because it's not the actual payment process for these masks. The way that it was set up was we just had a Google form, and this is, again, experimental. We set up a Google form, and then it was connected to a donation portal of ours. And it was just, you fill out the Google form and then you donate in our donation portal. But I think the next step as we kind of expand into this merch territory is actually finding a more reliable way to sell the masks.
Great. We have just two more questions. So one is from Steve, who asks, what would be, if there was a version 2 of Art Direction, what would be that version 2?
Version 2 of Art Direction as?
Like, let's say you had to print again, maybe with a different design, improved design, or kind of next generation design, what would that be?
Oh, interesting. Ooh, that's a really good one. Do I
Maybe
have an
no
answer?
changes.
Maybe no changes. I don't know. I mean, I guess I might want to experiment maybe with the scale of the Mayo satellite, like the print. What if scalability wasn't an issue and we just decided to do tiny little PVC pipes? What would that look like? I might also experiment wrapping less fabric around the PVC to still create this pattern, but kind of in different textures. Yeah, I actually don't know if that was a good answer, but I think that the idea of incorporating science with art, it's definitely, it takes some time, as I'm sure I explained at the beginning, or it was definitely a process, and sometimes things click, and then you just have to run with the ideas.
Great. We have shout outs from Madeline, who says, Michela is the bee's knees and a gift to new harvests in the world. And Jacqueline, who says, science plus art equals always cool. So I guess with that, we'll leave the last question. What is the best way to get in touch with you? And for those of you asking about the presentation, we will be publishing the recording, but maybe if you could let us know how we can get in touch with you and potentially share the slides.
Yeah, so if you want to reach out, my email is michela@new-harvest.com. If you want to learn more about New Harvest, you can go to new-harvest.org. Yeah, thank you so much.